Minister, there was a discussion. We'll talk about the policy on the governance and concentration, where we are, what still needs to be done. It's quite a journey, and the documents talk about how we're going to undertake that journey. The whole issue of foreign language interpreting policy, the whole issue of guiding policies on appointment of judges, conferral laws on senior counsel status and the briefing patterns, the reform of the civil justice system, policy on insolvency, and policies prescribed by the State Attorney Amendment Act, which the acting Solicitor General has started to work on them, and I'm sure he'll be able to come in if there are questions there to basically share on the trajectory we're going to follow in the next 2 years of his appointment. Slide number 6 emphasizes the management capability and consequence management. I did say, Chair, that one of the challenges that we've had as a department is the whole issue of the misaligned organizational structure in line with our commitment. So the critical things we've put into place is to set up a mechanism to review our structure. I've engaged with the National Treasury, and we've enlisted the support of the Government Technical Assistance Center, GTEC, to fast-track the process. We are now on course. They've started with the work. We should be able to have a revised and realigned structure of the whole department by the end of November. By the end of September, we're going to report substantial to this committee overview on the strategy itself, as I'm coming to the next slide. Slide number 16, it basically reiterates our approach I've just mentioned. On slide number 16, you can see that we are moving on the clean audit qualification approach in terms of strengthening our management capacity. We are looking to the repeat fundings, which have been part of our challenges. We are strengthening the risk management and international audit to help us to clean those environments, and we are also improving our data management system. We are hoping that coming to the next 2 financial years, we should be on course to a clean audit. We've got 4 main challenges in terms of our audit qualifications. As I've said, it's contingency liability, it's asset management, it's data management, it's performance management. In this financial year, we are hopeful that 2 of them will be cleaned out, so that even if we get qualified in the end of this financial year, we should only be on 1 or 2, if not a clean audit. We are putting all our heads on deck, or hands on deck, so that we work towards that arrangement. We have identified our risks on the slide number 17. As I've said, there are about 6 slides. These are identified in the slide. COVID-19 pandemic, budget cut, structure which is not aligned to strategy, lack of modernization, business vacancies, and potential fraud and corruption. Slide number 18, slow transform state attorney and legal services, case backlogs due to COVID-19, compromised physical and information security, increased gender-based violence, femicide, and incorrect reporting performance information. All these aspects are being reflected in our risk-adjusted plan, which we have issued separately. And I think when we report as part of quarterly reporting, we'll also be sharing with the portfolio committee how the courts are implementing that plan as part of addressing some of the challenges that are, or the risks that we face in terms of the realization of our plan. The slide number 21 reflect on the legislation mandate that we have, and those are the existing mandates. But on slide 23, which I'm going to take the committee to, it talks to the actual bills which are basically being prioritized for introduction as we move forward in the strategic plan period. Is the Commission on Inquiry Bills, Criminal Procedure Act, Land Court Bill, which the ministers going to, the Lower Courts Bill, the Magistrate Court Bill, Insolvency, Community Advice Offices and Paralegals, Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, Criminal Law, Small Claims Amendment, Code and Admission of Estates Bill, etc. On this slide, the most important thing which members should note is that we have basically revised and revamped our policy informed by the new policy trust that the minister guided. Our mission now is an accessible justice system in a vibrant and evolving constitutional democracy. We have emphasized the importance of constitutional democracy, advancing human rights, and which basically are becoming very critical. In the next slide, I'm showing the most important outcomes, which are going to guide our work, and they show down the slide. Outcome number 1, improve governance, modernized, number 2, modernized accessible courts and people-centered services, transformed master services, colonial apparatus era legislation reviewed, repealed and replaced, transformed state legal services, advanced constitutionalism, crime and corruption significantly reduced through effective prosecution, and criminal justice system digitized and integrated. All those are what is going to guide us as we move forward this new journey under our strategic plan and our APP. And I think the next slide then reflects how each of those are going to be taken forward as we seek to advance and improve service delivery environment as well as a clean audit. I want to run, yes. So the slides that go throughout there are basically setting out the different targets in terms of the things we want to achieve by what is certain. I just wanted I just mentioned those which are critical, and some of them will respond through questions as being asked. Are the crime corruption significantly reduced? Is one area where we are integrated completely with the NPA. They also talk to it in terms of their presentation, but you can see under 7A is the level of sophistication of the prosecution and identified crime types, 2 percentage of impact corruption, and those are the high level of prosecution which the NPA will speak to, and over the level of customer sophistication within the NPA services. Then the criminal justice under number 8 talks to our IJS. We need to allude upfront that we're in the process of revamping the IJS completely, both in terms of governance structure, but also both in terms of picking up those aspects which once we are able to achieve them, we should be able to transform the whole criminal justice system from a digital perspective. And that becomes critical as part of the COVID-19 legacy, because I think we need to be upfront in terms of how we are going to use the space of IT to claw back and to improve our service delivery. The other areas of emphasis under court services, the rollout of AVR. You'll see that although we have put 10 for each of the coming financial year, we have enhanced on those targets through our risk-adjusted plan. In fact, there's a new plan which we're working on. We are looking into increasing those numbers substantially because we've realized that it is only through remote remand dispensation that we are limiting the potential for the spread of the virus. Some of the aspects, as I've said, will respond to them. And when we come to questions, under the state legal services is the whole issue of the state legal services, which I wanted to emphasize. I already alluded to the need for the transformed master services, both in terms of the quality of service we provide and also the modernization that we provide. Chair and other members, I think it's time up for us to expect people to come to the court to queue for them to be told what they need to submit for them to claim for disease estate, what they need to submit to claim for medical offices, when everybody else, half of the population, can make claims can basically respond to SARS services, submit their tax returns online. We are going to migrate most of the services online so that the queue should be reduced to only those people who still need assistance by their staff in the master's offices as well as in the family law services. I'm talking about the bills, and I think from slide 40 we are showing the journey and the trajectory, how we're going to come around those bills. And then on slide number 46, we're indicating some of the policies that we want to focus on, and also the involved policies that are going to come through the state legal services, the whole issue of the percentage of value briefs allocated to female practitioners, policy guidelines in the conferral of the Legal Senior Counsel, which have been a bone of contention to many, and then in the profession, as well as the state attorney framework contract to be implemented. As you are aware, currently we don't have a very credible system for allocation of briefs, and it's one system we believe is going to help us clean up the contingency liability, but also create a more transparent mechanism of getting private counsel and attorneys allocated work in the government sector. I will move from the legal services and the rest. Slide 70 shows the whole side, the programs in terms of the integrated justice system. I must just say that we have appointed a new manager who's going to lead. He has been seconded, in fact, from AMSCO, Department of Defense. Special class is going to manage this program of IJS. The former colleague, Mr. Godfrey Seba's contract ended in March, and we've used this opportunity even to leverage on new opportunities that we can get, and it's coming on board with a vast experience and skills in this process, etc. Now, the recommendations which we are looking forward, etc. Basically, the recommendations that we are looking at from the next slide I've shown there is to make sure that the portfolio committee take account of this plan and the plan process and basically approve it, and take into account the risks and the budget and the COVID-19, which have basically been confronted us as part of implementing this strategy. The next slide, it shows that the committee will look to take note of the allocation strategy, which being implemented in line with the new dispensation being implemented under the Solicitor oversight, as well as the number of head officers appointed in terms of the plan. Also, to the target for indicator, we wanted the committee to note that there are certain changes which we have effected on the document since we have published, and those changes are reflected in the slide, including 5.2.1, where it indicates new targets in terms of the number of policies to be implemented. The document was speaking about 4 when they need to be 5. And then D, it talks about the Waste Councils in paragraph 5.3.1 and 5.4.1, which have been amended to legal practitioners in line with policy. And then we pray that committee approves this plan and the APPs as we move forward. Chair, before I'm going to allow the budget process to unfold for the 10 minutes, I'd wanted to end the presentation by basically extending our heartfelt apology to the collapse of the system, which crashed over some time. Over the past 2 to 3 months, since we started with the COVID, the national state of disaster, we have not been able to manage a very effective system, which has basically compromised the payment of maintenance in certain areas, in particular Eastern Cape and KZN, which have also compromised the quality of services in terms of master services. And this morning, we sat down and made a firm commitment that we are going to work with speed to basically improve on those systems. We are getting an external, the Department of Science and Technology, to come and assess the quality of our systems. Some of our systems are old, molded, and they are no longer able to carry the load of the work which have come up with the demand as a result of the crashes. And some of the system, obviously, is the level of corruption, fraud in the system. I must say that we are working on it. There have been some that steps which have been taken in the space. There are officials, both from senior management and the production level, who are basically been found to have not complied adequately with the expected level of accountability in terms of their processes, both in the security environment, which the committee have asked many times. Officials, 3 official managers have been suspended, and we are starting with the processes of disciplinary inquiries, which will be starting within the next 60 days, as well as in the supply chain management. The chief financial, the chief procurement, the chief director for supply chain management is on suspension, and as well as the chief finance officer is on suspension, got 18 positions, because the forensic report have found that there are quite a number of lapses which have happened through the value chain, and they'll basically be dealt with and clarified by a DC process which are going to be underway. I thought I must give that perspective before I allow the budget colleague from the budget to come and just give the essence, etc. I'm advised that we can look at that later so that we can allow the NPA also opportunity to present, Chair. I don't know, it's just to reflect that there is a meeting, there are ongoing discussions in National Treasury. A figure which has been banded for possible cuts in the justice environment is 1.7 billion. and that figure is not in relation to compensation. It's divided between services, 50% from infrastructure. And the idea in terms of scenarios which have been discussed, it's one for this current financial year. Emphasis should basically on the maintenance of critical services and even procurement of services. We must be mindful that the procurement of PPEs and the services related to COVID-19. In relation to facilities, we're only going to prioritize those projects which are ongoing, which are reaching state of completion. We are not going to start new buildings at what we have, whilst at the meantime we plan for the future ahead. So those are the highlights. The budget, the MinCombat, the Ministerial Committee on Budget, will finalize the scenarios, and I think we'll then communicate before. Well, I understand that there'll be a mini budget process which will be tabled towards the end of June, which will basically reflect on the new prioritized areas so that we can then reprioritize our plans. But those outcomes, Chair and other members, are going to remain as they are. It's only the level of outputs we are going to prioritize under each outcome so that we basically minimize what we're going to do this year. We are hopeful that by next year, much of the problem, the COVID-19 will have disappeared, so that we are going to avoid the pain of getting a projected 1.9 billion cut in the next financial year. If we get our challenge resolved within this year, some of the budget will come back into our coffers so that we can increase on the level of services that we need to provide for. That is overall presentation by Justice, and I've got a full team of ESCOM members in the boardroom, sitting far away from each other with our masks on, so that they are going to take questions and respond to the matters, etc., as may be raised by the honourable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate your guidance and look forward to a fruitful and constructive engagement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable TM, do you want to say something on the budget, in fact, on the presentation by Department of Justice?
Chair, no, I'm fine. I'll respond to questions and things like that, but I think, yeah, I'm fine for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now invite Advocate Patoi to make her presentation.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, honorable members, we're just trying to get the presentation on the screen, and we have a terrible sound that is coming from our system. I'm not sure what's causing that. Oh, it's a piercing noise. Just bear with me, Chair. I'm not sure what's causing this. I'm not sure if it's on our side or is it on yours.
I think it's on your side. Yeah.
All right.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. So good afternoon, Honorable Chair, honorable members. Good afternoon to the people of South Africa. We present to you today the 5-year strategic plan of the National Prosecuting Authority, as well as the 1-year annual performance plan. And colleagues, what we did not anticipate at this point is that we will be presenting it at such challenging times of COVID. If we thought that pre-COVID things were challenging enough, well, it just got exponentially worse, particularly within the space that we are working in. Chair, and during this time, in as much as there are serious challenges, there are plans that are being put in place within the justice and crime prevention and security cluster in terms of the economic recovery post-COVID. These have obviously not been factored into our strategic plans. And so we will have to look at whether there will be need for any adjustments. But I think on the key issues, it's still pretty much on track. Some of the issues that within the JCPS I will just allude to, is the issue that there's a strong recognition that in this time, there will be many that will be wanting or eyeing the cookie jar as the government has various relief interventions that are being put in place. So within this Justice, Crime Prevention and Security, JCPS cluster, we are looking at these, and we've in fact already put in place a fusion center concept so that all of these issues can be coordinated at a national office in a very strategic way, so that we so that we can react very swiftly once these to the commission of these crimes. There's also a proactive part which I won't deal with at this stage. Chair, the 5-year strategy that we will present to honourable members yourself today, it reflects, Chair, a new approach in the NPA in many ways. As the National Director, I'm now in office for 1 year and 4 months. And what we've realized is that this strategy must reflect clearly that this is not a business as usual approach, and that the rule of law has got to have a very central focus in the strategy. Chair, we are basically, we need to balance what is the short-term impact that we want to achieve, but also importantly, what do we want to achieve in 5 years moving forward? What is the kind of national prosecuting authority that we want to put in place that people of South Africa can truly believe in, have confidence in, and that we can all be proud of? And so this strategy seeks to address those issues. And so the 4 pillars of the strategy are basically independence, professionalism, accountability, and credibility. And parallel to the strategy that you will see today that we will present, we are looking at a roadmap to achieve this, as we call it, IPAC NPA, independent, professional, accountable, and credible, within the period of the strategy. We take a problem-solving approach, as you will see from some of the new outcomes that we have in the strategy. We want to look at efficiency and effectiveness, and importantly, Chair, we want to look at innovation. And although we are in times of COVID with serious challenges, we appreciate that it also provides us with opportunities for innovation that we should consider in terms of how we could be more effective in what we do. Next slide. Chair, this is just broadly the presentation outline, and one of the key objectives and goals of this period is really to restore credibility of the NPA, and to ensure that people feel safer. It's not just about conviction rates, you will see that. It is about trying to achieve certain very specific outcomes relating to safety. Next slide. Chair, next slide. Chair, essentially, this is just really a short slide, and I know the honourable members and yourself have actually looked at this, so I'm not going to go into any detail with regard to this slide, but it really just sets out the process that we engaged in terms of dealing with this matter and developing our strategy. Next slide. So, Chair, as I said, this strategic plan really demonstrates what the NPA will do to make an impact, Chair. We've realized that simply prosecuting on its own and finalizing cases is not sufficient, and that we really need to make impact insofar as the very high levels of serious and violence crime, sexual and gender-based crimes, and all of the other crime types. We really need to look at, so we looked at an impact statement within the NPA, and we said we would like a South Africa in which crime is significantly reduced and everyone feels safe and abides by the law, because we think that we feel that a culture of compliance is hugely important. And one of the outcomes is that crime and corruption is significantly reduced And I know that there are going to be several questions around this. I mean, the big elephant in the room is that, you know, people are waiting for certain actions that will demonstrate to them that corruption is being properly addressed. You know, the high profile cases that the country is waiting for. I'm sure there will be questions around that. But at this point, I want to say that in as much as Advocate Cronje is also part of the team, and she will explain some of the things that we have been doing in this regard. I want to assure honourable members and the public at large that there is a whole lot of actions that are taking place to address this, not just with regard to individual cases, which Advocate Cronje can talk to, but in order to ensure that we build a system. We must understand at this point, the system is not designed to efficiently and effectively and quickly deal with corruption cases. I've said in the past that in many systems, very advanced systems, it takes a long time to deal with these matters. And I've said we're not aiming for that. But in addition to the cases, which you will see progress on, we are looking at how do we ensure that we build a system in this period of 5 years where it has the necessary capabilities in order to effectively deal with corruption. The sub-outcomes that we have in this strategy identified are the following: increased feelings of safety and security. And Chair, you will note that these are very different from the outcomes that were in the previous plans of the NPA that talk to, for example, efficient prosecutions. And here we are saying simply prosecuting on its own and conviction rates does not actually end up in people feeling safer. So together with our partners, we actually want to look at what can we actually do to make sure that we are achieving the goal of people feeling safer. One of the other sub-outcomes is now improved investor confidence in South Africa through high-impact prosecutions. Chair, we realize that if we really want to make a difference in this country, we need to ensure that we build confidence in the system. When investors have confidence in the system, there's more money invested in the country. It can help to deal with all of our to address the sustainable development goals that we have in terms of what we have committed to in the UN system. It will mean that we are able to deliver basic services to the people of South Africa. So we have actually said we want to actually be judged by the fact that there's an improved investor confidence in South Africa in the NPA. And finally, we want to make sure that people have more access to NPA services. Next slide. Next slide. Chair, I know time is of the essence, so I'm going to have to move along a lot quicker. So, Chair, when we actually, how did we arrive at this? We realized, I think I've touched on this, that we really need to look at what has been the impact of corruption, and we really need to be thinking high level and not just conviction rate. And so there's some of the questions, and this is just during our sessions in terms of coming to these outcomes. The committee has looked at this, so I won't go through this in the interest of time. Next slide. Chair, these are the sub-outcomes that I've already talked about, and it reflects the indicators. We are looking at having, surveys that will Stats South Africa has a survey as well that looks at people's feelings of safety, and we want to, together with the SAPs, look at how we can perhaps deal with prioritized prosecutions, even in the lower courts, so that we are not just churning out finalizing cases, but that we are strategically prosecuting so that the people can feel the impact and do in fact begin to feel safer. I talked about investor confidence as well as improved services, and if there's any questions, we can deal with that later. Next slide, please. Chair, some of the initiatives that we have internally in terms of rebuilding the NPA, we are going to be focusing on, I mentioned, the NPA credibility. We are looking at, well, not looking at, we've developed a strategic support and innovation capacity within the Office of the NDPP in order to look at how can we strategically prosecute, how can we make sure that we introduce innovation into the NPA, and how can we ensure effectiveness of the NPA. We want to look at organizational capacity. I will touch on recruitment later, but that has been a huge part. It is still a huge part of the strategy. We have received additional funding, and we have been on a massive recruitment drive in the NPA to strengthen the organizational capacity. We are also looking at, no, the same slide. Sorry, no. We are also looking at, staff morale. We look at employee wellness. Communication strategy is a big part of this moving forward. We are also looking to develop an NPA complaints and ethics mechanism, an Office of Complaints and Ethics, and the issue of NPA autonomy vis-a-vis the Department of Justice. We are also looking, we're having, discussions with the Minister, the Community Prosecutions Initiative, and of course, the last bullet talks to modernization that the DG talked about, and we are implementing the issue of IT and the infrastructure, and the modernization generally is a huge part of our strategy moving forward. Next slide. I realize I have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to really move along. This is where I hand over to Advocate de Kock. Advocate de Kock, you're going to have to go through this quite quickly. We don't have too much of time. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
If I may say, Advocate de Kock is the Acting Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions in charge of the National Prosecution Service. Advocate de Kock, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the opportunity. Thank you, NDPP. So if we can move to the next slide, please.
I'm not sure if you've unmuted yourself. We can't hear you.
And we can't see you.
You are still muted, Advocate de Kock. Can you unmute yourself?
I've unmuted myself. I have unmuted myself now. Can you hear me now?
Advocate de Kock, we can't hear you.
I can hear you, Advocate de Kock. I can hear you very clearly, so I don't know why the others can't.
Members can hear you. The members
Yes,
can.
we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the opportunity. I briefly just want to cover three aspects: the MPA outputs, the MPA new operational indicators, and the E&E targets and indicators of the MPA. So if we can move to the next slide. This is a summary of the key MPA outputs. The first one relates to the effective prosecutions that the NDPP has referred to. Fraud and corruption is an area that is going to get specific attention during this period, and there's going to be a very strong focus by the prosecution working very closely with the police to deal with fraud and corruption. And so the prosecution service is busy reorganizing itself in order to effectively deal with that. The freezing of money and assets, the proceeds of crime, and the recovery of money and assets and the proceeds of crime are linked to that issue of fraud and corruption. And so the MPA wants to enhance what we are doing in that area, and the prosecution and the asset forfeiture unit will work much closer together moving forward in terms of how we're going to deal with that. Of course, everything is centered around victims, and so the whole question of how we manage victims throughout the criminal justice system will be an enhanced focus of the prosecution during this period. And we will also strengthen our CPO services that we render to victims in terms of court preparation will be a focus. This will help us to enhance the quality of our prosecution. And then lastly, in terms of the provincial outputs for directors of prosecutions, organized crime is a very important area that we will be focusing on. And of course, organized crime also incorporates elements of corruption in many of the investigation and prosecutions. And so those areas were all linked. So those are the 6 key MPA outputs. If we can move to the next slide. So here we see the new indicators reflected, the level of quality of prosecutions. Now, the committee will remember that this has always been a criticism towards the MPA, that we purely focus on conviction rates, and we don't often speak about the quality of the prosecution. So we've incorporated this as a new indicator over the 5-year period, and we're really going to focus on the quality of the work that prosecutors do. And hopefully this will help us to enhance what prosecutors do on a daily basis in our courts. 3 areas will be focused on. Training and development will be a large part of what we do. We will look at specialized prosecutions, like in our corruption space, the commercial prosecutors, our tax prosecutors, our organized crime prosecutors. We will spend lots of time and energy in developing our prosecutors' capability to effectively prosecute. And then we will look at modernization. How do we ensure that prosecutors can use the tools that are available to them in terms of doing prosecutions better? And then lastly, in terms of the day-to-day management of these issues, we will ensure that there's a survey that's done internally where we will consult with the judiciary, we'll consult with members of the legal profession, we will consult with the police and investigating officers. We will look at case preparation, we will look at case presentation, we will look at arguments, we will look at communication, we will look at knowledge and interpretation of the law, and we will look at decision making, which is a very important part of what prosecutors need to do on a daily basis. So all those areas at the end of each year will be assessed through this kind of approach. It will be a survey, and this will then inform us at the level of the NDPP office to understand what is the quality of the work that prosecutors are producing on a daily basis. So that is going to be our approach in terms of the quality prosecution indicator. The question of money laundering is an important aspect in terms of a new indicator. We've received some criticism from international bodies in terms of the way in which we address money laundering. So that is now a new focus in our annual plan and in our strategic plan, and this will be a focus in the directors of public prosecutions plans as well. And then lastly, the indicator in terms of public awareness sessions. This is linked to the access to MPA services, which is a new indicator as well. So overall, we want to improve the quality of our work.
Honorable Taylor, can you mute your mic?
So overall, we want to improve the quality of our work, and we also want to improve the access to our services by the victims of crime and by everyone else that deserves a quality prosecution in this country. If we can move to the next slide, Chair. So in terms of the operational indicators, and these operational indicators are the ones that will be in the annual plans of directors of public prosecutions. We are going to focus more strongly on the TRC cases. And so there we will develop a baseline of the number of reviews of all TRC cases so that we can ensure that this work is getting attention. by the walks in particular and by the police in terms of investigations, so that decisions can be made and these cases can be brought forward in terms of prosecutions. It will be a particular focus, and we have made decisions that these matters will be managed by directors of public prosecutions in the divisions. A new one as well, a number of accused, a percentage of accused, sentenced to direct imprisonment in regional and high courts. Here the focus is to ensure that in deserving cases, the serious crimes are attended to. The serious crimes are attended to so that people are sentenced to appropriate terms of imprisonment, particularly life imprisonment, and particularly in terms of the minimum sentence legislation that the country has. Conviction rate in priority crimes, as I've indicated earlier, that is a strong focus. The money laundering I've indicated, and the number of community prosecutions. This is also a new area that the MPA has developed in terms of a strategic approach. There's still work that needs to be done in terms of conceptualization and in terms of how we are going to ensure that this is going to happen in all our divisions. But what we want to do is to work closer with our communities. What we want to do is ensure that there's a better consultation process between prosecutors and communities so that we can identify the types of crimes that are affecting communities at a local level. And then we can work closer with the police and we can work closer with all other stakeholders. So unfortunately, the COVID-19 has interrupted us because we started this discussion in February of this year. And now we were going to do training of the identified first group of prosecutors who were going to become the trainer of the trainer to train other prosecutors in the country. So we are now looking at innovative ways to ensure that that training can continue. But we are confident that this may help us to try and address and reduce the levels of crime in our communities. Then the three that remains are the conviction rate in murder. Femicide is a new one that we will also focus on in terms of the gender-based violence strategy of the country, and then the conviction rate in murder and intimate partner femicide prosecutions. Those are new operational indicators. Can we move to the next one, Chair? Chair, these are the E&E targets of the MPA. And some of the indicators at a high level that the MPA needs to account to Treasury over the 5-year period. So the first category are the conviction rates, which we've spoken about before. The second category relates to the effective level of quality of prosecutions, which I've explained already. The third category relates to witness protection, that we don't want any witness that is a valuable resource to the public or to the country to be harmed on the witness protection program. So we find that very important. If we can quickly move to the next slide. The fourth category will be complex commercial and corruption. If we can move to the next slide. The last category will relate to the seizure of assets and proceeds of crime. So those are the key E&E indicators and targets of the MPA. I'm sure that the committee members have perused that, so I'm not going to go into further detail. I've given a brief overview broadly of the indicators and the targets that the MPA will be focusing on. So I think that is my part for now. Thank you very much, NDPP.
Yes, thank you very much, Advocate de Kock. If we could just move to the next slide, please.
It's just a delay there.
It's a delay, I think, yes. The next one.
It's not moving.
The slide is not moving. Can the members see the risk category slide? Yes, this is it. So if you could go back to that, please. Chair, very quickly, we have identified certain strategic risks They are outlined in the presentation, so honourable members are aware of the risks that have been identified. We also do have risk mitigation initiatives that talk to each one of these risks. I talked to some of them at the when I started the presentation, but to add to that, the first risk dealing with negative public perception, one of the interventions that we are looking at there, which I haven't mentioned, is looking at a donor oversight mechanism. We are also looking at enhanced integrity testing and lifestyle audits for prosecutors. We are also looking at a comprehensive training, a leadership training together with Oxford University and University of Cape Town. We are engaging to train about 100 of our the top leadership of the NPA in leadership training, which will also include an ethical component to it. And there are various, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the interventions. With regard to the second one, which is inadequate, and I would add ineffective stakeholder management, we have a number of initiatives together with SAPS and our other stakeholders to enhance this. There is also at the moment in the JCPS, there is a task team that's been put together, which as a national director I am chairing, which is looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of the JCPS, as well as looking at its substructures, the governance structures, looking at provincial structures. So this, Chair, is a very important task that the JCPS has decided to embark on in order to ensure that this entity, which is so important in dealing with crime, is more efficient and effective, because there's a recognition within the cluster itself that there have been various weaknesses in this regard. And so we are looking at joint measures with the police in various key priority crime issues. And I'll leave it at that. With regard to technology, insufficient use of technology, also a risk. We've talked to some of that, and I can certainly deal more with it if I'm asked about it. Lack of skills and capacity development. We have a number of initiatives to deal with this, professional development and training initiatives, knowledge management, but I'll leave it at that, and if there are questions, we'll elaborate on that. Next slide. We are almost done, Chair. The budget overview is the next, so perhaps I'll hand over to Hanika to take 2 minutes to take the committee through this, but we are having a problem with the slides that are taking very long to load.
Okay.
So Hanika, you have to be fairly quick.
Okay, I don't know whether I'm now connected and whether everybody can hear me.
We can see the slide.
Okay, we can see the
Chair,
slide.
can everyone hear Hanika?
No, we did.
Can you speak, Hanika? So maybe they can speak. Yeah, if they can. Yeah. Can you say something?
Hello. Okay. Can I continue there? I'm not. I think.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Well, okay. Under budget slide, on slide 22, this was the projected expenditure as at the end of the financial year. This picture did change a little bit with the end of the financial year. Where our compensation of employees, we still had a saving of 70 million at the end of the financial year. This was due to the additional funding that we did receive during the AE&E process during October, November. So the NDPP has already alluded to the recruitment drive that we're doing, but the process was a little bit slow in the last financial year. That's why we had the saving. But going forward, we will be able to spend our budget allocation. On the goods and services, on the slide in front of you, we projected a overspend of 53 million. This picture changed to 21 million because we haven't processed all the payments at the end of the financial year. On machinery and equipment, we've got a 75 million saving. On this line item, the Department of Justice has given us 90 million for new prosecutors for our for the MPA. We have ordered and the laptops, yeah. We've ordered the laptops and it was delivered before the before the lockdown, but we couldn't take delivery, so we couldn't pay this. We've paid it in the new financial year, but we've discussed this with the Department of Justice, so the expenditure will go through in the new financial year. On the next slide is just a breakdown of our economic classification, where you can see 85% of our budget is allocated to compensation. On the next slide is the breakdown of our additional funding that we did receive through the MTF, where we will look at the aspirants, filling of critical MPS posts, the capacitation and the establishment of the investigating directorate, and then the capacitation of AFU, SECU, and safety and security and the witness protection. On the next slide is just the MTF allocation going forward. On this slide, in the 2021 financial, the current year that we're in, we've indicated to National Treasury that we are giving 150 million towards the COVID funding, and that will come from our personnel budget, savings that we will do on our aspirant program and on the recruitment drive. But we, on goods and services, we don't have any room for any further cuts, so we will fully spend our budget, our operational budget. The next slide is just the plan on how we're going to spend it, and this is on goods and services. Is actually already contractually committed, so we're fully going to spend that, and then our recruitment drive in respect of compensation. That's the end of the budget presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you very much, Hanika. If I may, Chair, I just want to clarify that even though we have given back some savings from our compensation budget to the COVID-19 drive, that the NPA is in dire needs of the funding. We gave back this money only because we were not able to recruit as fast as we would like to. And so in as much as a lot of effort went into this, people only began coming on board from about February this year, which resulted in that saving. But the NPA is nowhere near full capacity in terms of what we need to properly execute in our mandate. Chair, the last two slides deals with the recruitment, and the final one deals with actually the dealing with the COVID-19 issues within, well, we have established a task team in the NPA, and then it deals with the broader JCPS economic recovery plan post-COVID. But I will leave it at that, Chair, in the interest of time, and take questions from the honourable members and yourself. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm sorry, we seem to have a problem. We're not hearing you. Clearly, the technology in the NPA needs to be improved, but it seems like it's not us then.
I'm saying in the interest of fairness, we have given you 5 extra minutes. So we will also give the Department of Justice 5 extra minutes so that they can present their budget. Department of Justice. Advocate Kosana.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to mention just an incident which happened when we were just about to do that. Because of our contact tracing register, it emerged that our acting financial officer had come into contact with someone who had shown serious signs of COVID-19. He was with us here and then he had to leave. so that the compliance officer and the team are dealing with the process, and so they can check if he needs to be quarantined or so. So this is going to be part of our challenges as we move along. And we're also saying to those who are close to him as well, they need to be engaged in the process so that we minimize the spread as much as possible. But the presentation was circulated, and I've spoken to him through it, and I think I'll just go quicker on it on the next few minutes and focus on the slides, which I've spoken to in terms of the impact of the budget cuts. On slide 2, it basically shows the spending patterns and the budget pressures. Slide 3, it shows the classification and the funding choices in terms of different classification and how we've been spending. You realize that the spending on the compensation of employees have basically been going, whilst we have had certain elements where there have been basically areas of pressures which are indicated in red. Year-on-year expenditure growth on our personal expenditure shown in the next slides, which basically will reflect to as we get into questions. And then slide number, the next slide, I don't see the slide number, shows the year-to-year growth on the budget and still on the compensation of employees. The funding choices, the slide number 8, it shows where the 9% share of our budget goes to compensation, and obviously the goods and services account for 18%, whilst the 1% accounts for transfers to subsidies. Now, Chair, it's where the issue are going to be. If the budget cuts are made, which are projected of 1.7 billion, it means we are going to be forced into a situation where we pay salaries, but we are able to get very little activity in terms of the payback for what people have been paid for, and we are still debating on those environment, on those areas, on those options with National Treasury to see how we can absorb those budgets. But I also wanted to say that the 500 million of the budget cuts, and I think I must go there, so that I must go the slide so that it can basically, budget cuts per program. We indicate that most of the budget cuts, because of this of the size of our department, obviously the great budget goes to cost services. Now, when to absorb those budgets, you basically have to get the greatest chance.
Seemingly, we have lost him.
I'm still here. Yes. We are back again. That was the budget cuts in terms of the normal cuts, which came before COVID-19. I wanted to go and show to be for COVID-19. Yes, it's from slide 27, Chair. We have basically projected what would be the cost of the budget cuts across the justice cluster. As you can see. This is the project expenditure and related COVID-19 only. We project an expenditure of 354 million. That's in terms of provision of the PEs, in terms of the deep cleaning services when the courts are closed down, whatever. As I've said, this is the budget which we have never anticipated, which was imposed by the pandemic and which we have to provide for at the end of the day. Then I'm going to come, these are the budget cuts. This is what we are basically projecting in terms of the cuts, in terms of the day-to-day maintenance facilities, where to make a serious in terms of the service we are able to provide. I'm going to show number 30. It gives the impact of the budget cuts. We are saying that the filling of the critical post must only be informed by expenditure patterns on the goods and services, because we don't want to enlarge and fill all the positions when we're going to have too little hands, which are going to be able to use for purpose of the programs. But what we are saying is that some of the programs like your IJS should not be compromised, because it is during this time that we need to expand our service, our modernization program, so that we can leverage on the legacy of the funding. And yes, I wanted to indicate that our cuts, the cuts across the legal aid and SIU, the public protector, are going to be also are going to have huge impact. There's about 500 plus million which must be cut across all those three entities. And the one which will suffer most obviously is legal aid South Africa, because it means out of the 2.1 billion which already are their budget in this current financial year, if you're going to cut 300 million, is going to basically make a serious inroad into what capacity legal aid is going to have in terms of people, legal aid practitioners who must defend people at a cost. But I wanted to project those aspects, and those are the things that we keep engaging on, and we hope that we'll have time we'll have the opportunity to minimize the impact of the budget cuts and find a way of absorbing them in the areas which you can stretch out and put later into our priority list and deal with those which are happening in the short and immediate terms. Chair, as I've said, we can respond to that, but as I've said, in the absence of the acting CFO and the director with whom we had contact, we will just give this presentation, but whatever further details that need deeper analysis, we'll submit written responses to the Honorable Committee. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Honorable Deputy Minister, do you want to comment on the NPA?
Chair, no, I'm also fine for now.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I've noted the following members who want to ask questions. Can you please also indicate to which entity are you referring your questions to? The first one will be Honorable Glenis Breitenbach, who has questions for both DOJ and NPA, and then Honorable Mohammed, Honorable Nivot Drachans, Honorable Horn, Honorable Maseko Jele, Honorable Mufukeng, Honorable Mufukeng, Honorable Swart, Honorable Janji, and the last one will be Honorable Nola, in that order. Honorable Glenis Breitenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not switching the camera on because the reception is affected by the camera. My questions for the Department of Justice, firstly, are the following. And before I start, Mr. Chair, let me say that despite any of the questions or the tone of some of the questions, when I've had any difficulties in the last couple of weeks and I've asked the Deputy Minister for assistance, he has always assisted me promptly and kindly, and for that I'm very grateful. So this is not to be seen as a reflection. To the Department of Justice, what contingencies have been put in place to deal with the challenges of dispensing justice during the lockdown, with particular reference to ensuring that people are not detained in prison cells or as remand detainees in prison unnecessarily? Then the second question, what procedures are in place to ensure sufficient support personnel in courts, clerks, interpreters, etc., to keep the wheels turning and simultaneously ensure the safety of the personnel? Those hundreds or thousands of cases that have been rescheduled to new court dates, how are people kept informed of these developments? How will you ensure that cases are simply not lost in the chaos? You mentioned that you're going to migrate your systems online like the revenue services. The ICJS has been in a project implementation phase for 20 plus years now, and we are now nearer to getting it done. How will you migrate your systems online now? How is this going to be any different? Then I want to tell you a story of a gentleman in Cape Town. And the Deputy Minister helped me with this gentleman as well. A gentleman in Cape Town who was arrested on a bench warrant for contempt of court in the early hours of the morning on a Thursday at his home 2 weeks ago. He was taken into custody. No one knew where he was taken. After much phoning and following up, he was traced to Goodwood Prison. Bail was set at 2,000 Rand. His employer was willing to pay, eager to pay. No prisons were accepting any money. Neither Goodwood Court nor Bishop Laver's Court was open at all to accept payments. 1 week, 7 days later, a bench warrant for contempt of court. This man was still in prison. He was eventually, after daily efforts and much traveling by his employer, bail was paid and he was released. There must be many, many, many more of these cases. How is this allowed to happen? You say you have a boardroom full of senior managers sitting around socially distanced, waiting to do work. This is the kind of thing they should be working on. Then for the National Prosecuting Authority, you say that the effects of COVID were not factored into the strategic plan. It's not conceivable that there will not be a huge impact by COVID on the NPA. So how is the strategic plan relevant without the inclusion of the effects of COVID, and how are you going to remedy this? Then has a review been conducted to evaluate the successes, which will be quite short, and the failures, which will be quite long, in respect of achieving targets set in the previous MTSF of 2014 to 2019, and if so, what are the results? Your slide 5, you talk about IPAC, impressive. Goals to be lauded and certainly to be chased. Talk about crime significantly reduced and everyone feeling safe and abiding by the law. So how will you achieve this very laudable goal? It's one thing to say it, one thing to say you want to achieve it. Very nice, I hope you do. But how are you going to achieve them? Why would people abide by the law? If decades have gone by with no discernible consequences, with the incredible scale of corruption and criminality that we have witnessed over the past 15 years, why would people have respect for the law? No consequences. The National Director started off by acknowledging that she's been in office for 14 months. And all the things that you've listed that you want to achieve are great. I sincerely hope that you achieve them, and it's exactly what we need to hear. But hearing is one thing. Again, how are you going to do it? How are you going to reduce crime? How are you going to increase investor confidence? How are you going to make people feel safe when we have not seen any action, not even one high-profile arrest or prosecution or conviction? So lofty ideals are not going to cut it. When will a high-profile case be enrolled? When are we going to see these matters reaching court? Bearing in mind that we're already in the last weeks of May. You've told us about recruitment. That's wonderful. You need to recruit. We all know that to make a good prosecutor takes 10 years, to make a good specialist takes 20. So recruiting is one thing, producing the competency is another. But what I want to know is, what is the NPA doing about cleaning house? You've been there 14 months. All the high-ranking prosecutors and other staff who enabled and participated in the capture of the NPA are still there. Some of them are part of your core team. You know who they are, we know who they are. With the exception of Jiba and Khwebi, there's been no action against anybody, and you haven't even taken a decision in the Jiba matter. Why is this? How do you expect to clean up the NPA? How do you expect to achieve your goals with these individuals still in the system? Unless and until they are dealt with, the organization cannot move forward and it will have no credibility. So when is this going to be happening? Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Good day. Thank you, Chair. Let me firstly welcome and thank both presentations from the DOJCD as well as the NPA. I've got a couple of questions for clarity. I'm referring you firstly to, for DOJ, Department of Justice, on slide 26 of the budget presentation, okay, where it reflects facilities management and day-to-day management maintenance on infrastructure, particularly on capital works. I've noted the budget there of 874 million as opposed to the previous financial year of 510 mil. It's a variance of about 364 million rand. And then I note the day-to-day budget is minus 56% on the slide. Now, as we know, given COVID-19, the impact and the fact that the previous financial year we could not dispose of the full capital budget, are you going to adjust this? Because it's unlikely, in my opinion, that we will spend this unless you say the completion, like you indicated earlier, projected completion dates of level 4 and 5 in terms of public works, a building that is about to be completed. If you can just clarify whether the full 364 million is indeed for those projects, and if not, what will happen? Will it be adjusted, this particular budget? I know you indicated that the large cuts will come from probably capital works. If you can just elaborate on this one. Then, Chair, with regard to still with the budget, we heard in the daily dispatch, and I think you touched on this at Kuskusana, on the Moja Pay payment, where third parties apparently did not submit accurate information to ensure matches with beneficiaries. I think it's London, I'm not sure. Has that been mitigated? Has it been resolved now? Where are we with it? If you can just elaborate from the APP's perspective. Thirdly, Chair, on the IGS, sorry, before I move on the infrastructure, if we can get a completed presentation, maybe it can be emailed to us with the completion date of both the capital works as well as maintenance of infrastructure, just with the dates as elaborated earlier in the presentation, if we can get that. Then, Chair, on the IGS governance framework, we can also get a copy of the IGS governance framework, particularly now that it's critical. But I want to know the existing 47 ABR rollout, or rather existing ABR mechanisms that we have. I've noted in the target in the APP, you got 10 for this financial year and 10 for next financial year. Is that a national rollout only 10? Or is it, can it be per province? Because if I recall correctly, when it was launched in 2012, 8 were done in 1 year in one province. So if you can just indicate, I think you mooted something to the effect that you will look at this, but if you can just give us a better understanding of the rollout, why the target is so low. Then, Chair, fourthly, with regard to the APP again, the upgrade of existing 309 magistrate district courts to be victim-centric courts. How many of these courts will be upgraded for this financial year over the 3-year period? And the targeted funding, from where would that come? Then, Chair, I just want to also touch on the audit and stabilization plan. Did the minister sign off on this? And has the impact of COVID-19, what is the impact of COVID-19 on this plan? As well as with regard to asset verification, which you touch on, has the asset verification in contingent liability quality been assured now at this end of the financial year? What happened there? Also, Chair, then touching on vacancies in HR, last we got a presentation that there's a recruitment process on senior management for March. Obviously, because of COVID-19, I assume that was not attained. What is the latest with regard to that plan? On the I think it was 40 SMS posts Then coming to the what we call the backlog case plan on the APP, I don't see an indicator how this will be measured. Maybe still work in progress, and I know there was a meeting that you referred to. Will the APP in this regard still be added to the plan? If we can get some clarity on that. Second last, Chair, I'm coming to the national, or rather the acting Solicitor General and the briefing patterns on previously disadvantaged individuals. I just want to check the quality control there, because often we find executives in government, both at provincial level and national, has certain preference as clients, right, for council. Has this risk been captured in the PDI of the policy itself? For various reasons, they prefer certain council. And what is exactly, how is that managed in particular? Then, Chair, on the pillar 1 of the COVID-19 risk adjustment plan, the so-called RAP, pillar 1 there is on information technology. And we've noticed that the implementation of Justice Online, serious platform, as well as digital signature, civil matters, maintenance applications, print and publications will now be ceased or stopped and replaced. Now, in the light of the already 250 million in budget cuts on state capture as well as on the IGS, how is this being budgeted for? Also, the replacement of the department's warehouse on off-site storage, how is this going to be budgeted for? Is there a closing report on the previous project in this regard, as well as what is the legislation pertaining to this mooted earlier in the presentation? And then also e-submissions, Chair. With regard to e-submissions, I see there's a very exciting target date of 30th of June, where memorandums and communication will be done through underway, and what would be the cost to that effect. I already covered AVR. As I come to the end, Chair, I want to just clarify on the gender-based violence and femicide plan and the emergency response action plan. Now, just on that, the cold cases on the task team, maybe we can just give an update on that, because I couldn't find it in the APP reflector. Maybe it's there. If we can just indicate whether that's, because that's one of the national priorities, as we all know, to come back on what happened to those cases as pronounced by the president. Maybe the NPA can elaborate on that one. So thank you very much, Chair. Sorry for taking a bit of time. I'm going to cut back now. If there's a second round, I will get to my second round of questions later if there's time. Thank you very much.
No, members must ask all their questions now.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can finish it off. Then this lastly, Chair, the end. The grant on corruption, Grant Thornton report into Bosasa. I think that when we last spoke to the acting DG, Edward Kosana, he indicated that he received the report on his desk, and I think he mooted something to, there's some disciplinary action underway. Is that related to this finding of the Bosasa matter or Grant Thornton report? If we can just get clarity on that one. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Nieuwoudt Dragens.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And good afternoon to everybody present, and thank you to the presenters for their presentations. In terms of access to justice for people with disabilities during lockdown, what are the strategies or what is the access provided to people with disabilities? Also, in terms of women, youth, and people with disabilities, their access to court, what has been provided during lockdown? And I have a concern that if the Department of Justice is using sign language interpreters on their AVR systems, and if they are working with are they working with NGOs who have AVR systems as well? Are they working with NGOs to provide those services? I have noticed it has been in media reports, and I've received complaints that people are now resorting to mocking sign language interpreters when the president presents, he does the COVID-19 presentations. So I have a question. Is there a process to fast track sign language as an official language? Because my feeling is that if sign language was an official language, people would be very careful about mocking the language and being discriminatory against people who use South African Sign Language. So that would be my question, if there's any process underway to fast track the official language status of South African Sign Language. And then the program for 1.4, so just interpreter getting clarification. In the administration program, bullet point 1.4, people with disabilities employment, there is no figure, there's no percentage. So I'm curious to know what was the figure there. And then in terms of court services, 2.411, people with disabilities. Again, there's no percentage. So if you can give me that figure. And what are the reasonable measures put in place to deal with the complaints that are presented by people with disabilities? From, in relation to gender-based violence. Regarding the system, is it generally and now my questions to the NPA. So technology is very critical, as we all know, because of the virus, and virtual meetings are the way to go. And is there a process of fast tracking, technology in the organization for people to work? And how are you?
Thank you, Chair. Connectivity seems to be an issue again today. So with your permission, I'm not going to switch on my camera. Chair, my first question is to the department and the target that over the next 5 years during the medium term, there is to be established one additional specialized commercial crimes court in the 5 provinces that currently do not have them. The question is this plan still on track, and when not if the budget cuts come, can the department give an indication as to whether this specific target will be impacted on? Secondly, Chair, in respect of the National Action Plan regarding xenophobia, we see that the target is that this was to be developed during March 2020. And we know that the Minister in his briefings to the committee has indicated that there has been significant progress. Could the department, in respect of the way forward, inform us as to how near implementation stage is this action plan? And I ask this specifically, Chair, because I don't think it bears specific insight into the South African culture to say that there is a huge risk in the coming months if socio-economic circumstances worsen during the winter and the COVID-19 pandemic, that South Africans unfortunately will again focus their anger on foreigners. And then, Chair, there is a target both in the department, and we saw it the other day at the Office of the Chief Justice, regarding the establishment of what is called a social compact between the 3 arms of state. And there's envisaged that there be engagement between the 3 arms, the President and his cabinet, the Chief
Justice and presidents of the various courts, speakers and heads of Chapter 9 institutions to coordinate and strengthen governance and accountability. I firstly want to know whether the format of these engagements has been finalized, if at all. Secondly, I want to just comment and say that I think the different role players should be careful of, in my view, of using the term social compact. In that, if you look at the dictionary, a social compact entails an implicit agreement in which certain members of society, and if we want to call the three arms of state then a society, cooperate to achieve certain benefits. But the danger is that certain of the role players then have to give up certain freedoms in return for some protection. Ordinarily, it would be individuals giving up some freedoms in return for protection from the state by way of its police and its defense force. So I'm not quite sure whether the word or the term social compact should be used in the circumstances, but in any event, I think we also from the legislature side, as having oversight over separation of powers, need to be afforded further information. Then, Chair, I want to turn my attention to the issue of GBV, and specifically the issue of the national strategy that was settled on after the presidential summit towards the end of 2018. We know that there was an interim steering committee and that now came to an end on the 28th of April. The President thanked them for their work on the 30th of April, but what is of a worry is that the national strategy envisaged, and that strategy was settled on more than a year ago, March 2019, that by April 2020 there should be in place a gender-based violence and femicide council. So the interim steering committee has come to an end, but there's no sign of the council. To what extent is the department as a frontline service provider, has there been any movement on the setting, settled on a 51% in the up to the 26th of March when we went into lockdown, done work to ensure that civil society representation is done on a representative basis. And then lastly, in respect of the GBV, we also know that there's been set up a gender-based violence and femicide fund, and that it's unfortunately already been involved in some controversy. I want to know from the department whether this fund will be situated within the department, and if not, what lines of engagement, integration and accountability have been put in place, since the department ultimately is delivering the type of services that must lead to the identification of those who qualify to benefit from the fund. Then, Chair, to both the department and the NPA, I'm back once again at the issue of certain of the targets related to specifically GBV-related offences. We still sit with a situation where some targets are put in percentages and others in numbers. Advocate Betoy would recall that at the very first engagement after she took office, she admitted that the way these targets have been phrased over the years is not reliable, credible, or ultimately helpful to either the NPA, the department, or this committee. But yet in this new APP and Strat plan, there's no new way of going about it. What is the situation there? Is the NPA and the department still thinking afresh about this? And why is it that we unfortunately see a repeat of the unhelpful targets we've seen in the past? Then, Chair, in respect of backlogs, others have referred to it, but I'm specifically on the issue of the backlogs created by lockdown. The Deputy Minister has twice given us figures that I think must be worrying to all of us. And if one extrapolate or project these figures, then if we are to have a non-functional criminal justice system specifically for another 2 months, there will be a huge mountain to climb to ever address the backlog. Now, last Monday, when we met with the Minister, he indicated that he is I don't want to say ordered, asked the department that they, as soon as practically possible, must convene a meeting with the NPA and Legal Aid South Africa to develop a case backlog management plan. I want to know whether this has been at least convened, and if so, if it has taken place, what progress have been made, and by when could we be in a position to know what the actual plan would be. And then to the NPA specifically, Chair, and this is my third last question. The President, in announcing the 21-day lock, dealing in a very swift manner, said that certain consultations within the cluster still had to unfold. They indicated to us that a meeting has taken place of what they again referred to the ACTT, although the NPA has previously told us that this body is non-functional. But what was of a worry is that they indicated that they in the NPA have agreed that due to their the SIU's unique characteristics, they will be dealing with this matter. And our reaction was that typically their turnaround times are very slow. They have the benefit of recuperating funds after the fact. But if one within the situation has to deal with it, everything cannot be left to them. So I want to know from the NPA, given the President's announcement, have these special units been set up? And if so, what have been achieved up to now? What are these special units doing? Then, Chair, in respect of the arrest of a prosecutor in Limpopo, we saw this week in Thohoyandou as part of an undercover operation. Obviously, we must welcome the fact that there is movement on dealing with corrupt prosecutors. The negative side of this was that if one looked at the reaction on social media, it was generally a reaction of if there's one, there has to be many. So unfortunately, public perception is not on the side of the NPA in respect of the honesty and integrity of in respect of the rank and file prosecutor. So I want to know whether this is part of a broader strategy on the part of the leadership of the NPA, and whether they simultaneously also have a communication strategy around all of this in order not to let public perception run all over them. And then lastly, Chair, and the Honourable Mohammed has also referred to the Bosasa issue. I want to just ask slightly on a slightly different angle. We know that the CFO is suspended, and I don't want to discuss the merits or demerits of either the suspension or the case against her, but from what we gather, the suspension turns on or had the effect at least that certain awards regarding security tenders, which she's now accused of being unduly involved in an improper manner, has been set aside. And the net effect of that, if I understood media reports correctly, is that Bosasa, or African Global Operations, have now been awarded a part of the security contract from the department side. And I just want to have an explanation how the department can justify this, given the fact that after the revelations on how corruption has fatally infected the relationship of Bosasa with government departments, and even the sister department of this department, DCS, making the bold and very correct decision to cancel all Bosasa-related contracts, how it can be justified that this department, the Department of Justice, has ultimately taken a decision which now again benefits Bosasa. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Maseko Jele. I think she's experiencing such. Oh, okay.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Can I also switch off my camera?
Okay.
I'm just saying this because we want to at least not to be delayed by that, because I just also experienced another an occasion about that. And I'm going to have a question on that one also. But let me first, Chairperson, welcome the presentation for both departments. And my first question is on the very issue of the security around visual platforms. It has been reported, Chairperson, that there has been a continuous network interruptions experienced by prosecutors on the DOJ and CD networks. How is this being resolved by the department? Again, on the issue of migration, the acting DG indicated that they are going to almost, if not all, going to move to online services. My question on this one is that what are the plans that are there within the department in taking the previous disadvantaged communities along as they are moving towards total online services usage? And also on the issue of the crashing of the system, which he has reported on, I would like to also find out the plans. What are the plans in making sure that this does not happen again? Chair. I also have the question on the DG, the acting DG, reported on the prioritized bills that are going to make sure that they deal with or attend to them in this country.
Honorable Jale, we can't hear you. Honorable Jale?
Through you, Chair, it's H and I, and to me it's number 7 and 8. That person is still there.
Honorable Jale?
Can you still hear me?
We could not hear you for some time.
Oh Lord. Okay, can I don't know if maybe, where do you want me to go back to, Chair? Because I'm on the issue of the list, the prioritized list of the bills.
You are still asking the acting DG a question, then you were interrupted.
I was interrupted. Okay, the first question was on the migration to the online services, Chair. I'm sure that one.
Yes, we received that one, honorable member. We also received the one on the crash of the system. That was the last point we could hear.
Honorable Jale, we will come back to you. Can IT assist as we are moving to other members? We will come back to Honorable.
The acting DG, if maybe.
Honorable Jale. Honorable Jale, we will come back to you. We will come back to you.
Okay.
Honorable Mufuke.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks for the presentation from Justice and NPA. My first question will be on NPA. What lessons, if any, have been learned that will be applied to achieving the targets set in 2019 to 2014 and in the medium-term strategic framework? And what risks have been identified that may hinder achieving the outcomes and target? The other question going still to NPA is on the mainstreaming of cross-cutting focus areas, especially the role of women, youth, and people with disability. How will the department ensure these focus areas are mainstreamed at all levels? As we welcome the a national strategic framework, a plan on the gender-based violence. I want to know on how MPA is going to help clear the backlogs of cases of gender-based violence and femicide since the COVID-19 report actually indicated the increase. Are there any plans of specialized prosecutors being trained to preside in those cases? Because we realize that most of them that were working on that were not trained. And the issue of the same NPA is that there was a media report about a Limpopo prosecutor that was arrested by the Hawks for demanding 6,000 to make a case disappear. How far is the matter? And the NPA, is it actually having a training? I want to find out if you have training on ethics and integrity management within the institution. And the last question on NPA is about the special commercial crime courts on the serious economic crimes. I want to find out on cases, the backlog of cases. One is aware of cases that are over 10 years. And those that are over 10 years, how many are they and what are the challenges that are there? And now the case that the matter that I'm going to now, Chair, is on justice with regard to case management. What kind of monitoring systems are in place? Are they on manual or on technology? And those are both for NPA and also for justice. On the justice, I noticed on program 2 on court services, the facilities management. I want to check on, are there any plans in improving the client services, especially on where women are actually coming for the protection orders because there's no privacy? And if we talk about one of the outcomes being the department talks about modernized courts and people-centered services. For them to achieve that, are they looking at those matters? And one of the issues that are really one is wondering about them is that when you go to court, you are going to be observing a case or maybe supporting somebody. Are you supposed to be so much traumatized with the kind of benches that are there? Can't we look at a better courts as we talk about modernizing? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we go back to Honorable Maseko Jele?
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies for that also. And I'm sure I'm just going to go straight to the NPA, Chairperson. I'm sure the DG might have maybe caught some of the questions that I asked earlier. On the NPA, Chairperson, when the advocate Batoy was reporting, he said he wanted to deal with the issue of system once and for all. But my question on that is that, do we have any timelines that we can say within this period, this would have been happened, and we see the movement in line with it? And that takes me also to the issue of the uniformity. Is there any directives issued by Justice Minister, Chief Justice, and lastly, the directives issued by the various judge president? Is there any consistency under the different divisions of the courts in respect of the accommodating the use of e-technology, Chair? That is the second question. Also, I have a question on also one of the strategies where they are saying they are going to restoration of the NP. I'm worried, Chair, that we still talk about the restoration of the NPA my expectations are that, Chair, up to this far, we should have been having a report as to how far is the NPA in relation to that matter. Because when the advocate Batoy came in the department, that was the first issue that was expected of her, to make sure that the NPA credibility is restored. Can I hear his a comment on that issue? And then number 4, Chairperson, I want to find out what are the steps taken to prevent any opportunistic corruption and fraud in the procurement of goods and services required for the purposes of preventing the spread of COVID-19. Again, the increased numbers, if they can report on the increased numbers of gender-based domestic violence matters. And lastly, subsequently, the possibility underperformance by the branches. If they can, I can hear the comments on that one. And then through the audiovisual, and those who were, if they can hear their comments on the advocate also audit for the prosecutors, which I think it should have been looked at it because of the issues that has been alluded earlier by my colleagues, that it is very important that we should have already had a plan on that issue, because there has been complaints and the community has been raising concerns in terms of the corruption that is taking place, particularly within our ranks in the justice. So I think Advocate Patoy will have to assist us and do a lot of work in that regard, Chairperson, because that it is a threat to the independence and impartiality of justice. So we are expecting a lot of work going forward within this 5 years. But can you get a comment on that one also? Also, Chairperson, I have a question on the very same issue of strategic. They are saying they're going to deal with fraud and corruption, but we don't hear the plans or maybe the indications as to what approach are they going to take when it comes to this issue? Because fraud is all across all the departments. Now we are experiencing that also within the very same department. We would want to know what plans to totally eradicate that. And also on the question of recovery of money and assets that are proceeds of crime, we still don't have a report as to at least what has been done up to this far. We don't have that report, Chairperson. We have cases that colleagues have indicated. And also, we know that there have been cases, offshore cases, Chairperson. We are still waiting for those monies. As to how far is the NPA in terms of recouping all that which belongs to the government. I think the last one, Chairperson, on this issue, last time when the Advocate Patoy was here with the team, there was a question by one of our colleagues about the allegations within and people who are dissatisfied, the same NPA, which talking to the social media trend. So can they also can attack of racism? The NPA are they for no fine of racism attack?
Thank you, Chair. Questions, but I would like to add, Kasana is concerned. You're facing massive challenges, and we appreciate that with the budgets, with your high levels of vacancies, And clearly at a management level, I think it's very, very concerning that most of the management position is held by acting positions. And whilst I'm sure everyone is doing their utmost, can we get an indication of when those management positions will be filled? Secondly, Chair, this is a broader issue that we as a committee need to look at. The concerns about the budget we raise continually. Now we are facing, the department is facing severe cuts, and the NPA. And I've said it before, how can we expect the department and the NPA to do their job sufficiently if they are not given the sufficient budgets? And now we're going to see further cuts, and it doesn't make sense to me. And Chair, we need to start exercising our powers in terms of the Money Bills Act. We need to look carefully. In particular, we will have a greater opportunity at the adjustment appropriation bill when we see the funds that are going to be moved for COVID-19. I'm deeply concerned about the expenditure of those funds, and it has been raised by my colleagues, and I'm pleased that the NPA and the SIU are putting in a fusion system to look at that. But my specific question on that is, what is being done on a day-to-day basis? I know you don't have to give us the prospective, but reactive. We heard today about the hijacking of PPEs at Albert Tambo Airport. This is now the new goal. And there's millions and millions of rands being stolen in that regard. Can I then also ask the department, it's deeply concerning about the collapse in the maintenance. I understand an apology, but that doesn't cut it, because that is people that are desperate. People are starving at the moment. And if they're not getting their maintenance, then that is absolutely deplorable and is inexcusable given the situation that people are faced with at the moment. So I need an assurance that that is not going to happen again, and what steps are being taken to make sure that those maintenance people that are desperate for their maintenance is received. In that regard, my colleagues have raised the issue of the opening of the courts, the access to courts. And Chair, if schools are expected to go back, and if school children and teachers are expected to go back, then surely every court should be manned as soon as possible, and the courts should be open with due regard to the health and the hygiene that is needed. And we should insist on that happening, because we have got this massive backlogs that are taking place, and we've already seen that. As far as the backlogs are concerned, I'd like an updated figure, and I'm very appreciative of the Deputy Minister indicating the concerns around the admission of guilt on the breaches of the lockdown. If the NPA can give us an update of the figures of dockets that have been referred to them for decision since their last indication, because that obviously is a great concern to us. And if it is the NPA's intention to restore credibility, which is commendable, and to try to have compliance and encourage compliance with the law, then my belief is that the regulations and the petty regulations are going directly against that, because it is encouraging non-compliance, because it is making criminals of normal people that have maybe stepped off where they shouldn't have, or 5 minutes later, and that is a great concern to me. So I would like that issue to be addressed as well. In that regard, it's not sure whether the court directives, what qualifies as petty offences. And I'm sure the prosecuting authorities will take all representations into consideration when they consider whether to prosecute. But already that trauma has taken place of arrests that is ongoing, that we've seen tens of thousands of people being arrested for lockdown breaches. That is adding to that, and I would strongly urge that that is looked into. Can I then also just ask, as far as the issue relating to the budget, Chair, as I indicated, if we're going to cut the budget of the SIU, the NPA, Human Rights Commission, Legal Aid, how can we expect them to do their job sufficiently? And if we give them their sufficient budgets, they're able to collect money. And it is beyond rationality to me. If we allow those budgets to be cut, then those billions that should be collected will not be collected. So in that regard, I'd again ask if Advocate Cronje can advise us on the high-profile cases, the critical issues related to the United Arab Emirates, the extradition, the mutual legal assistance. When we raised that issue with the minister, he indicated that they are a conduit, the department is a conduit, and that lies mainly with the NPA side. Can we get an indication? Can we get an indication when we're going to start seeing those high-level cases being commenced with? Chairperson, then I would like to ask us to obtain some sort, and maybe Advocate Sustana can give me an indication, because I'm increasingly concerned about the whole issue of COVID-19. And I appreciate that it is an unknown area. I appreciate that we are going into unknown and that there is every necessity for health to take place. But if you take the figure to date, it is estimated that 500 people will die by the end of this month. And Advocate Sustana said in his management now, someone showed COVID-19 symptoms and there was a disruption there. I'd like to know, what is all this? Because if you take that, and we need to appreciate the precedents and the regulations, but at the same time, since lockdown, 50,000 people have died of other chronic diseases. So all I plead for is some balance. And I know that is a political issue more with the minister and the executive, but we as exercising oversight need to start exercising some form of balance in this whole issue. I've personally experienced it, so I can speak from experience. So, Chair, I am concerned in that regard. And lastly, the issue of Judge Fabricius's scathing judgment in the Causa matter. Whilst it doesn't impact directly on the MPA, it does impact on law enforcement. And I would ask whether the MPA, in the light of that judgment, is taking any steps to expedite the investigation into the death of Mr. Causa and others who have died at a heavy-handed approach by the police. In that case, it was by the Defence Force, and it is surely great concern for each of us, Chairperson, when the judge indicates the almost military tactics against the people of Alexandria. And yes, it's changed. Hopefully it's been addressed, but that should be a great concern to each of us. And hopefully the MPA can give us an indication of what they are doing to prevent heavy-handedness from the law enforcement authorities. And it's not good enough for the Human Rights Commission to say they've condemned it. When you have the United Nations Human Rights Council issuing a scathing report about South Africa and other countries that are breaching human rights when it comes to lockdown provisions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Mutimunya, can you switch off your camera? We don't want to see you eating. Honorable Janji.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, he's been demonstrating how he eats and what he's eating. So thank you for that intervention, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to use my limited time to cover two areas. It's Program 2, the court services, and then I will deal with the NPA issues because I think I'm attracted to those two areas. On the court services, firstly, I think on page 22, in terms of the output indicators, the first point I want to make, I think it will be proper at 2.3 phase of femicide watch system, that perhaps we either have got a footnote to define these phases and the context of them, or we rather clarify this, because these documents are also public documents. Anybody else must read this and must be able to follow and understand. That will be my first point as a way of suggestion. My second point on page 23, it's 2.8. Let me start there. The sexual offences courts. The indicator here is saying number of sexual offences court designated in terms of section 55. I've got an issue with this, and I've always raised it, learning from you, Chairperson, that the issue here is not the number of indicators. So what I'm told here is 27, 36, and 27. And the question I would ask them, so what? Because you're creating this number of courts. You're not dealing with the quality of service that must come out of this. Because people are interested in the access into those courts, the kind of results in terms of those cases, whether there are less backlogs. If you are in Limpopo, that court must be able to operate, must not be affected by issues of water and other things. These are the kind of indicators that we want. Because these indicators about the numbers, it's easy to achieve, but it is not addressing the impact of the services. And I'm really, and I've been raising this issue, that we need to try and define and improve on the quality of these indicators. So I'm certainly not impressed, even if you can achieve that 27. It's not going to help the Khayelitsha Sexual Offences Court with the kind of challenges that it has, where disabled people are not able to access the kind of courts in as much as you have built it. Let me leave that chair. And then the next point I want to raise is on 2.5, policy to reform criminal justice system. This is also a matter that has been under our committee, the Criminal Procedure Act, and it's also a Concord matter. And the issue I want to raise there in terms of that quota is that terms of reference and policy framework to be developed. And the question I'm asking, where are we now? And again, I bring this issue that I brought to the other department. Well, we're already gone, have 3 months gone in terms of our work. And it will be important that we get some clarity on those kind of issues. And the same 2.16, it's the same, it's very similar. 2.1828 magisterial district in terms of the supply of database for foreign language interpreters. I'm not convinced that this is the only way to do this. We have seen in annual reports how this is a challenge, even at Home Affairs. When you look at their reports, this become a blockade. And I'm hoping that you are going to share with us how you are dealing with that particular issue. And then if I have to go to page 26, Chair, it's the number of audiovisual remand systems that have been rolled out. So in Q1, you plan that you have rolled out 2. And my question immediately would be, I don't think that if you have been able in Q1, which is where we are now, to have achieved those 2, because we're under lockdown. And if we have not achieved, what is the kind of review process? The next one, which is the phase 3 of the femicide watch established on Q1, you said you're going to do data analysis report on the femicide watch report. That's what you should have done. In fact, you said on Q2. And the question I'm asking, why should that, because this is a desktop work, why should that not have been done in Q1, which is this quarter, which does not need you to be physically driving and doing. And therefore, you plan the report to be done at the end of the financial year, Q4.
Yes. Sorry, Kanchi. There is a funny noise.
It's not from my side.
Sorry?
It's not from my side.
Yes, there's funny noise. I think let's all mute our mics and only allow Honorable Chanchi's mic to be on. Honorable Chanchi, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Let me quickly run. And so perhaps I would not do this page by page, but I think the thrust of my comments are that I'm looking for the quality indicators and outcomes here, and I'm not getting it under the court services. I'm staying on the court services because the NPA, this platform is the court services. So when these things are not properly done, you can expect that it will affect them in terms of their kind of work. And the same question on Q1 on page 28. All I'm asking was, where on Q1, if you could indicate whether all of those things have been done, because it's quite easy things to do. And quickly, Chair, I want to go to the NPA. Let me leave the court services because I've raised kind of comments and questions that will cover almost every page of that section. So I'd want them to attend to that so that I don't necessarily run page by page. On the NPA, Chair, this is where I want to spend a little bit of time. On the NPA, I want to share the following because I move from the premise that what I see from what the NPA is presenting to us, I see an emergence of a plan coming together, and I have a sense of happiness about what I'm seeing. Obviously, I've got a few questions because when we met with them in October at the annual report, we asked them to produce a plan as to how they are going to turn around the NPA was finishing a year. And the point I was very happy with your process plan because it means stability, and you can see the roadmap on page. And therefore, it's not for me now to ask the slide with introduction. I would have suggested that you add a fifth pillar because those four pillars, you can have independence, but it would not give you anything about effective prosecutions, which you have further down as a sub-outcome. But if you can have a fifth pillar, which speaks about effective prosecutions, because all of those four must give a result of effective prosecution, because on their own, I don't think they can take us very far. And then, Chair, on page 6 of the presentations, I again, perhaps as a comment as to how they arrived at these outcomes and outputs, I just want to make the comment that I think the kind of questions that you ask yourself as NPA, as you have listed them there, it's a very good set of questions, and I'm very excited about that. But I want to say this to Advocate Batoy, that an inquiry and a diagnosis is as good as a response and as a remedy. So the questions are kind of giving you a diagnosis and inquiry, but we're looking at whether you are able to give effect some actions out of that. The three sub-outcomes on page 7, I only have got a small comment on the first one, which says the level of satisfaction with the prosecution of identified crime types. I was asking myself the question, how are you going to be measuring this? It will be good if it's linked with sub-outcome 3, where you say a level of customer satisfaction, because it means you must do a survey to understand the increased feelings of safety and security. Again, I'm only making a comment there, Chairperson. And quickly, I will leave others because I am not in the business of just giving good news, but I'm happy with that. I'm saying it's really the plan is coming together, and I think we should be able to do that as the portfolio committee. It's the hard and soft approach. We can't just everything that comes in front of us, we don't see the good work that is happening. Chair, on page 13 in that slide, annual performance plan indicators and targets, I think Honorable Mohammed raised this. I'm seeing a trend, and I'm not worried about the trend unless it can be explained. If it is explained, the trend is that in your medium-term targets, your indicators or targets are kind of reducing. So the question I want to ask, is the reduction in terms of those or the drop, is it done in the interest of the quality of work? Remember, you said that as part of the new indicators is the quality of work that you want to do and not just work. So if you can just indicate that, otherwise I'm very happy with that. And then, Chair, my last towards the end, then they have what we always ask for, the risk category, the risk register. And I even like the process they followed there, public perception, stakeholders, technology, and skills. But here is a question, Chair, because they produced the strategic risk. I am of the view that they need to go back because it is not complete. And I will indicate where it is not complete, Chair. For example, out of 4 risks that they have identified, 3 of those risks are high risk, they are in red. There's only 1 risk that is medium. So it says it's very tight. But what is lacking in this risk register, Advocate Bato, is that you are saying here is a key risk, the negative perception and reputation of the NPA, and then you outline the contributing factors. But what you are not indicating is what are the mitigating actions? How are you going to fix? It's not explained here, because from there all you do is to rate it, and yet you indicate who's owning it. But I am interested, so that when you come back, for us to measure you, we must measure you through your mitigating factors. And I'm sure I don't need to preach this. You would know better the mitigating factors. You know, when a verdict is put there and so on. So there's an absence of mitigating factors here. Otherwise, it's not measurable as it is now. It is as good as non-existent at this point. So in overall, Chair, I think we are now beginning to get a proper plan from the NPA about what is it that they are planning to do, and I'm really embracing the kind of plan with a few questions, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mola.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for being late, but I did report where I am. Chair, the first thing I think I had noted is in the impact statement of NPA, where it is said that everyone, the impact statement actually wants to give a message that says everyone must feel safe and abide by the law. But I would like to check, was there are cases against prosecutors having been bribed to deal with some matters, which even NPA has made them to the public discourse. I would like to check first, Chair, what is going to happen to those prosecutors had they be found guilty?
Chair, I'm sorry, it's not very clear. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not quite, it's a bit unclear.
Honorable Mola, maybe you must consider switching off your video. It can improve your audio.
Yes, I did, Chair. I hope it is fine now.
Honorable Advocate Patoi, can you hear now?
I can hear, Chair. We can try this. It hopefully will be better.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm saying in the impact statement, test statement of the NPA, and I'm saying with regard to that impact statement, there are publicized cases against NPA prosecutors whom have solicited bribes to deal with certain matters. It's the NPA who even took those matters into the public discourse. So I want to check what are the measures to ensure that we curb such conduct within the organization. Another issue, Chair, is an issue of one of the, if not first, of the MTSF priority areas, which is to promote sound workplace relations and employee well-being. In addition to what Honorable Jelle was asking, we have got a number of complaints, which I think even some groups of prosecutors have even written to the committee, where there is a perpetual allegation against racism that happens within the organization, persecution of some of the employees who are NPA prosecutors who speak out of the ills that are done by their by their bosses. So there are those. There are even public complaints of the recruitment process, that which is has been done bogusly by those who are in the authority of doing such with regard to those two matters. The third, with the still on the NPA, is the issue of there has been complaints of a shortage of PPEs. Let me say alleged shortage of PPEs during this level 4 alert level 4 of COVID-19. I want to check with NPA if they have prepared for the pronounced level 3 alert level 3 pronounced by the president in terms of the PPEs, in terms of preparing the offices when the employees get back to work, and all the related matters. There is an issue, Chair, that is made as an assessment tool in the NPA report, which is the rate of convictions. The rate of convictions, of which the Chief Justice is adamant by saying we cannot use the rate of convictions to assess prosecutors because that is not their own scope of work. So I would like to check what is the view of the NPA on that, because this issue of conviction rate, whether it's high or low, should we make it as a tool to assess the performance of NPA, whilst knowing that this thing of conviction lies in a different arm of government, which is the judiciary. On the issue of the risks, that part of the risk that the NPA says in the APP, Chair, is the issue of interference with the NPA independence, which I view it as a very serious issue. Maybe I would like to check from Advocate Batogi if there has been attempts by any stakeholder of society to temper or to undermine the independence of the National Prosecuting Authority. Part of the issues that we are dealing with in the court administration is the issue of the backlog of cases. Backlog of cases which is caused by partly the absence of court officials, the absence of litigation parties. In the NPA point of view, are we contributing in these statistics in terms of the absence of prosecutors, that which contribute on the postponement of some cases? If the answer is in the affirmative, what is our mechanism that we have established as the organization to ensure that we curb the absence of NPA that may or might lead to the postponement of some matters? I hope I'm still audible, Chair. Then I see gestures by Advocate Batu. I'm not sure if she got the last question.
Focus on your on asking questions, Honorable.
Let me go to the Department of Justice, Chair. A lot has been asked, so I have got only two questions on the issue of the Master's Office and the paperless administration. There is what the legal profession says, a biased instruction from the Master's Office, which in it includes bigger estates being given to the previous privileged legal professionals or legal practitioners, and the smaller estates being given to the previous disadvantaged. I want to check if they have been able to notice that, or they have been able to get the report on that from the legal profession, and what are the plans to deal with that. I think, Chair, the last question was covered by speakers before me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we will respond NPA and justice. I would like to ask 3 questions. One, why was the reprioritized strategy on the Justice College not finalized by the 31st of March? The second one, which is leveled, is directed to justice. Why was the vacancy rate allowed to reach 22.6%? And then NPA, what is special about this Oxford University? Leadership training could be done by South African University. What is it that Oxford University is bringing, which the South African universities do not have? And what are the financial implications linked to that? And then I think this one can be answered by justice. The implications of COVID-19 on the Zondo Commission, given that they are not sitting and the court granted them until March next year, what will be the implications of that now? Will we have Zondo Commission extended beyond March 2021? Those are my questions. I will allow NPA and Justice 5 minutes to confer, because you have received many questions. I think you would need some time to confer. Advocate Badu to confer with her team, and Advocate Skosana to confer with his team. I think the Deputy Minister can answer the questions that he wants to answer. He's free to answer from both NPA or Justice. It doesn't matter. So can we have a comfort break for 5 minutes?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, is JB Skosana, we've conferred. We just wanted to get from the DM whether he'll come at the end after answer, just to close up, or we want to introduce us before we answer.
That's your own in-house issue. Can deal with it.
Yeah, but we've got to use this platform to communicate. Acting DG, I'll come at the end.
No, you should be able to use your own phones. Don't eat our 5 minutes time now.
Okay, Chair, I'll also take that approach. I think I've got colleagues who will from Justice, and then I will come and round off after all have spoken. Then GM will close the question of the Department of Justice, or perhaps after the NPA as well have given. Without any waste of time, I'm going to start with them the way we are seated here. And I think the first response, Chair, if the committee honorable members are ready, we'll take the question from the IT.
Advocate Skosana, we have taken a break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Please.
Askies.
Okay.
We're relaxing a bit.
Okay. 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 indicate that